You are listening to Personal Development Mastery Podcast, providing those with a desire to grow with the simple, consistent actions needed to master personal development and create the life they yearn for. I'm your host, 𝘁𝗸𝗲𝘄𝘆𝘀, and a few years ago I found myself unfulfilled and unmotivated, like I had lost my sense of purpose and my life was merely passing by. Since then, I've been on a continuous journey of personal development and self-mastery that has transformed every aspect of my life. Now my mission is to inspire you to grow, stand out, and take action towards a purposeful and fulfilling life. Welcome to episode 251, and starting from this week, the podcast goes back again to having 2 episodes a week, Monday and Thursday. On Mondays we'll have the conversations with my guests, and on Thursdays we'll have a solo episode. So in today's episode I will carry on with a concept I started back in episode 245, which was reflecting and consolidating the learnings of the most recent previous episodes. Instead of adding more knowledge, I revisit the previous episodes and consolidate the wisdom imparted by my guests. My intention in these kinds of episodes is to distill the wisdom of my guests and share it with you in a way that you will find something that clicks, that inspires you to take some kind of action as a result. I realize more and more that repetition is the mother of learning, and that's why I find it important to revisit the previous episodes, reflect on them, and break down the learnings of the conversations and convert them into actions. If you've listened to the podcast a few times, then you probably have heard me saying that my mission with Personal Development Mastery Podcast is not to inform, it's not to pass on information. Rather, is more about influencing, inspiring positive change, creating transformation. You see, there is an abundance of knowledge out there, so lack of knowledge is not the issue. What's important is converting this knowledge into actions that will create behaviors, that will create results, that will create change, improvement, self-growth. And in this particular episode of Reflecting and Consolidating, my intention is to pick those actions, those elements that you can implement in your life. And I hope you find it useful and valuable. So today I will reflect and consolidate the learnings of the 4 previous conversations with my guests on the podcast, and the first one I will discuss is episode 246 with 𝘁𝗸𝗲𝘄𝘆𝘀, who is a multidisciplinary artist and coach. One of the things that we discussed was this loop of thoughts that happens in our mind every day. Every day we have something like 60,000 thoughts, and most of them are repetitive and they loop and play over and over again. And of course, these kinds of thoughts, this loop of thoughts, can lead us to the same actions, because our thoughts determine our emotions, decisions, and our actions. So if we have the same loop of thoughts running over and over again, we will tend to have the same decisions and the same actions. And hacking this loop of thoughts and breaking out of it allows us to create a micro choice. It doesn't have to be something grand or something huge, but this micro choice or these micro choices create the macro results in our life. And as a practice, in order to be able to facilitate that, Katie talked specifically about practicing gratitude. And her suggestion was to use a journal, either a separate gratitude journal or the journal you already use and practice writing every day what are 3 things you're grateful for. It is a simple daily habit, and there have been other podcast episodes where I discussed gratitude and techniques or ways to practice gratitude in more detail. One other thing that Katie talked about that it is very implementable is to check in with ourselves once a day at least. So you can set an alarm. I have mine set at 3 p.m. and another one at 9 p.m. So check in with yourself. How are you doing? How are you feeling? It literally takes a moment, less than a minute, to stop, check in with yourself and reflect on how you're doing, how you're feeling, how has the day been for you. And if it's possible, write this down in your journal. It's a very powerful practice that builds momentum. And you get into the habit of checking in with yourself more and more. And this can have a multitude of benefits in all the other areas of your life. The second episode I will discuss today is number 247 with Adam Adams. Most of that conversation was quite specific about podcasting and how podcasting can be an asset to your business. One of the things that Adam shared I found very powerful was how having a podcast is related to your personal development in terms of growth, in terms of the consistency you need to develop to put out the episodes, in terms of the vulnerability of putting yourself out there and expressing yourself. One other thing that Adam talked about, and it's implementable, is to challenge your money thresholds. He talked about believing in your service. So take a moment to ask yourself, do I really believe in my service? Am I actually helping people? And if you do feel like you're really doing a great service, then challenge your money threshold. And he mentioned this specific example. If you think that $1,000 an hour or X amount is too much for you, then ask the question, why do I think that this is my threshold? This is a very good way to deal with self-sabotaging thoughts and also becoming aware of that threshold, because not everyone is aware that they have a money threshold or a glass ceiling, as some people call it. The third episode that we will discuss today is 248 with Scott Anderson. Scott is an expert in the area of burnout, which he calls one of the big entrepreneurial plagues. He also believes that burnout can be a blessing because it gives us the opportunity to realize some things. One of them being the idea of letting go that can come to light because of the burnout. We often are used to just work harder and worry more and do more. And the first thing to discover is that there is another way that you can manage stress and you can succeed in business. Scott mentioned some very practical key shifts that entrepreneurs can use to beat burnout. And the first one is to address stress in a different way than we've used to, and to embrace our thoughts and feelings. He called it taking a mini vacation, like a 10-second vacation, which is notice that you're stressed, notice that you are upset, notice that you are disturbed or depressed. You don't even have to understand why, but just notice it, and that can be a very powerful thing. Then simply inhale through your nose and just notice the stress that you're feeling, and then exhale through your mouth and visualize the stress leaving your body. This technique comes from Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul. It is a very simple technique, yet deceptively powerful, and it only takes 10 seconds. And the final episode I'm going to reflect on today is episode 250, this week's episode. And actually this is a milestone episode which is, as I say, 1/4 of the way to 1,000 episodes. And my special guest is Dr. John DeMartini, the world-renowned human behavior expert and one of the feature experts in the film The Secret. I believe the best thing to do in this particular situation, rather than trying to compress here in my own words the 50 minutes of John DeMartini's wisdom, what I will do instead is direct you to a resource that Dr. DeMartini shared with us. It is a workbook, a free workbook called 7 Steps to Expand to the Next Level of Empowerment. You will find the link in the show notes so you can download it and study it. As a very brief description of what that is and what kind of implementable actions you will find there, one of them, the first one, is to identify your unique hierarchy of values, the list of priorities that each of us has, and it is entirely specific to us. No two people ever have the same hierarchy of values at any one time. Understanding our hierarchy of values is a prerequisite to mastering our life, and it is the first step because knowing yourself, being willing to be yourself, is the key to loving yourself. The second step is expanding your vision and being congruent with our highest value and structuring our life around that value. That builds momentum, which in turn makes our vision grow bigger. The other steps include managing our emotions, breaking through subordination, taking high priority actions and delegating the low priority ones, and owning your value, which means being rewarded and remunerated truly fairly for what you offer to people. You will find the links to everything discussed in this episode in the show notes. I hope you found this episode useful and valuable. If you want a special ebook that I have created containing the best actionable takeaways from some of the most important previous podcast episodes, then go to personaldevelopmentmasterypodcast.com/ebook, and there you will find implementable strategies on a multitude of topics, from finding your purpose to calibrating your intuition, money mindset, visualization techniques, emotional intelligence, improving your meditation, the Wim Hof method, and more. And one last thing. If you found today's podcast of value, please take a moment to leave me an Apple Podcast or Spotify review and share how personal development mastery has made a difference to you. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,